There are nights that exist purely for celebration, nights that belong to you completely, that the universe constructs specifically around the architecture of your joy, and the Friday that Natasha Adeyemi was promoted to branch manager of First Korean International Bank at the age of 30 was exactly that kind of night. She had earned it with the focused, unhurried determination that characterized everything she did. Climbing from junior teller to senior banker to assistant manager over 6 years of work so precise and so thorough that her superiors had run out of reasons to delay the inevitable. The promotion letter had arrived on a Thursday afternoon, and Natasha had read it twice at her desk with the composed expression she wore at work. Professional, warm, entirely in control, and then gone to the bathroom and done a silent, full-bodied celebration that her reflection had witnessed and approved of. Friday night, therefore, belonged entirely to Natasha. She spent 2 hours getting ready, which was not unusual. Natasha approached getting dressed with the same seriousness she brought to quarterly financial reports, because she understood, with the clarity of a woman who had thought carefully about the world she inhabited, that appearance was a language and she intended to speak it fluently. She was 30 years old, Nigerian-British, with skin the color of dark honey and eyes that catalogued everything around her with a speed and accuracy that occasionally unnerved people who were not prepared for it. She was 5'8", all of it carried with the easy confidence of someone who had made peace with exactly who she was. Tonight she wore a deep emerald green dress, fitted, sophisticated, with a neckline that was interesting without being obvious, and heels that added 3 inches and a particular kind of authority to her stride. Her hair was down, natural and full, and she had done her makeup in the way she reserved for occasions that deserved it. Precise, luminous, the kind of face that makes strangers look twice and keep looking. She wore the gold earrings her mother had given her for her 25th birthday, because her mother had said, "Wear these when something good happens," and something good had happened. She looked at herself in the mirror. "Branch manager," she said, to her reflection, trying the words on. Her reflection looked extremely pleased about this. Club Elysian was in Gangnam, the kind of establishment that occupied that specific category of nightlife that was expensive enough to be selective and well-designed enough to justify it. The music was excellent. Not the relentless, undifferentiated thudding of lesser venues, but something with actual architecture to it. Something you could exist inside rather than simply endure. The lighting was warm and amber and strategic. The bar was the length of an aircraft carrier and staffed by people who understood that making a drink well was a craft worth taking seriously. Natasha's friend group, 5 women, all of them working professionals in Seoul's international community, all of them in various states of delight at the promotion news, had claimed a section near the dance floor and established themselves with the decisive energy of women who had earned a Friday night and intended to use it fully. There were cocktails. There was dancing. There was the particular laughter of people who are genuinely happy for each other, which is rarer and better than any other kind. Natasha danced. She was a good dancer in the way that people are good at things they do purely for themselves. Unselfconscious, joyful, not performing for anyone's approval. She lost herself in it, in the music and the movement and the specific, uncomplicated pleasure of a body that knows what it's doing and is allowed to enjoy it. It was during a pause between songs, one of those brief atmospheric shifts when the DJ was transitioning and the dance floor briefly breathed, that she saw him. He was at the bar. That was the first thing. Not the dance floor, not a table with friends, not engaged in any of the social mechanics of a place like this. Just the bar, with the focused, private relationship with his drink that told a story before you'd heard a single word of it. He was Korean, clearly, strong features, sharp jaw, the kind of face that photographs well, and, she suspected, commanded rooms when he wanted it to. He was dressed expensively, in the subtle way of people who wear money without announcing it. Dark shirt, watch that caught the light once and then didn't need to. He was objectively, extraordinarily handsome. He was also unmistakably in some kind of pain. This was Natasha's particular gift. The thing that her friends called Natasha's radar, and her therapist had called highly developed empathic intelligence, and which Natasha herself called simply paying attention. She read people the way other people read, whether not from any single sign but from the accumulation of small ones. The set of his shoulders. The way his jaw was slightly clenched. The quality of his stillness, which was not the stillness of contentment but the stillness of a person holding something very heavy and trying not to let it show. The speed at which he was drinking, which was not the speed of celebration. Something was wrong with this man. She was certain of it with the completeness she reserved for things she understood rather than merely observed. She should have left it alone. He was a stranger. This was her celebration night. She had friends 10 feet away and a perfectly good cocktail and absolutely no obligation to insert herself into the private suffering of a man she had never met. She walked to the bar. She stood beside him and ordered a water. She was pacing herself, always, and in the 30 seconds it took for the water to arrive, she studied him in her peripheral vision with the discreet intensity of a woman who has turned observation into an art form. Up close, the stress was even more visible. There was something around his eyes, a tightness, a fatigue that went deeper than one bad night. She took her water. She turned to him. And she would spend considerable time afterward examining exactly what sequence of impulses produced this decision. She leaned forward, put one hand briefly and gently on his shoulder, pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, and then pulled back and looked at him directly and said, quietly and with complete sincerity, "Whatever it is, it's going to be okay. I promise." She watched something move across his face. Surprise first, pure, unguarded surprise, the kind that bypasses whatever composed exterior a person maintains. Then something underneath it, something that arrived in his eyes and stayed there, open and undefended in a way she suspected he was rarely open and undefended. He opened his mouth. She gave him a small smile, warm, genuine, the real one she didn't hand out to everyone, and she walked away. Back to her friends, back to the dance floor, back to her celebration. She did not look back. She did not know his name. She did not know that in approximately 2 weeks, the fact of her would become the primary preoccupation of one of the most powerful men in Seoul. She finished her water, ordered a proper cocktail, and danced until midnight, when her feet staged a diplomatic protest regarding the heels, and she and her friends relocated to a late-night restaurant for jjajangmyeon and the kind of conversation that only happens at 1 in the morning after dancing. She went home. She slept beautifully. She dreamed about her promotion. She did not dream about the man at the bar. Not yet. His name was Kang Jae-won, and he was 35 years old, and he was, depending on who you asked and how much they valued their own safety, either a very successful businessman with diverse holdings across Seoul and 3 other cities, or the head of the Kang organization, which was the polite way that certain newspapers referred to something considerably less legitimate. He was not the kind of man whose name appeared in police reports. He was several layers of legal insulation removed from anything that messy, but he was the kind of man whose phone calls got returned immediately and whose reservations were always available and whose presence in a room changed the texture of it. He had gone to Club Elysian that night because his driver had suggested it when Jae-won had said, with the flat, exhausted honesty of a man who had been sitting in his office for 14 hours processing a crisis of significant proportion, that he needed to be somewhere that was not his office. The crisis was real. A business situation that had been deteriorating for 3 weeks and had reached, that Thursday, a particularly acute point, and Jae-won had been carrying it with the self-contained rigidity of a man who had been carrying difficult things alone for so long that he had forgotten there was any other option. He had not expected to be kissed by a stranger. He had not expected to feel, in the 30 seconds of contact and warmth and the direct, certain kindness of those words, "It's going to be okay, I promise," something unlock in his chest that he could not entirely explain or name. It was not romantic, exactly, or not only romantic. It was something more elemental, the feeling of being seen by someone who had no agenda around what they were seeing. She had looked at him across a crowded bar and read something true, and offered something genuine in response, and then walked away without asking for anything. He had turned to watch her go. He had watched her reach her friends, watched her laugh at something one of them said, watched her move back to the dance floor with the free, joyful ease of a woman in her element. He had watched her for perhaps 2 minutes and then made himself stop because staring was not something he did and the sensation of wanting to continue was unfamiliar enough to be worth paying attention to. He had gone home. He had slept, for the first time in 2 weeks, without the crisis sitting on his chest. He had thought about her in the morning. He had thought about her the morning after that. By the end of the first week, Jae-won, a man who solved problems with the systematic, well-resourced efficiency of someone who had been doing it for 20 years, had decided that Natasha, whose name he did not yet know, was a problem he intended to solve. The search for Natasha began with what Jae-won considered a reasonable and proportionate deployment of resources and what his head of security, a phlegmatic man named Do Hyun who had worked for the Kang organization for 11 years and thought he had seen everything, considered a sign that his employer had genuinely lost his mind. "You want me to find a woman?" Do Hyun said slowly, in the tone of a man repeating something back to confirm he has heard it correctly. "A black woman, approximately 30, who was at Club Elysian 2 Fridays ago. That is the description." "She was wearing green," Jae-won added. She was wearing green, emerald green, a dress, and gold earrings. Sir, Do-hyun paused. That is still not a great deal to work with. She kissed me on the cheek, Jaewon said, and told me everything would be okay. A very long pause. Do-hyun had, in his 11 years with the organization, heard Jaewon say many things. This was in the top 5 most unexpected. She kissed you, on the cheek, and told you everything would be okay. Yes, and you want to find her because I want to find her, Jaewon said, in the tone that meant this was not a conversation that required further interrogation. Do-hyun wrote something in his notebook. It may have been "Find the green dress woman," or it may have been something else entirely. He closed the notebook. I will look into it, he said professionally. The search was, by any objective measure, an adventure. Step 1 was the club itself. Do-hyun's team reviewed the security footage from Club Elysian that evening, which they obtained through means that Do-hyun declined to specify in his written report, and identified Natasha clearly on camera. A tall black woman in an emerald dress who had approached the bar, spoken briefly to Jaewon, and walked back to a group of 5 women near the dance floor. The footage was good enough to see her face. It was not good enough to identify her. Step 2 was canvassing the club staff. The bartender who had been working that section remembered her. Very beautiful, ordered water first, then something with elderflower, but did not know her name or how to find her. Step 3 was, and Do-hyun presented this in his briefing with the flat professionalism of a man who had learned not to editorially comment on his employer's decisions, returning to Club Elysian every Friday, for 2 weeks, on the operational theory that she had been there once and might return. Jaewon went himself. This was the part that became, in certain circles, a story that was retold with increasing elaboration and decreasing accuracy over the following months. John Jaewon, feared and respected and generally considered above the indignities of ordinary human pursuit, dressed himself in civilian clothing, or as civilian as a man of his wardrobe was capable of, and sat at Club Elysian's bar on successive Friday nights nursing drinks and looking, according to multiple witnesses, like a very handsome man who had been given homework he did not know how to complete. His lieutenants heard about it. They said nothing to his face because they valued their continued employment. They said a great deal to each other, in the break room, in lowered voices, with expressions that ranged from confused to openly delighted. He's going to the club every Friday, said one, whose name was Byung-hoon and who was 29 and had perhaps insufficient self-preservation instincts. To find a woman who kissed him on the cheek, confirmed another, named Sungil, who was 31 and knew better but couldn't help himself. A woman he doesn't know. He doesn't even know her name. A reverent pause. She must be extraordinary, Byung-hoon said finally. Or he has completely lost it, Sungil offered. Can't it be both? Could be both. It was both. Natasha, entirely unaware that she had set off an organizational manhunt, was having an excellent 2 weeks. The promotion had come with a new office, corner, glass-walled, with a view of the Mapogu Street below that she found genuinely pleasing, and a new salary that she had received notification of and then sat with for a moment in the way you sit with things that confirm a direction you have been moving in for years. She had redecorated the office immediately, because Natasha understood that spaces reflect intention, and she intended the space to reflect someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She had brought in a small monstera plant, 2 framed prints, and a coffee maker that was considerably better than the communal one in the break room, because she had earned good coffee. Her team, 12 people, ranging from fresh graduates to experienced bankers, had adjusted to her management style with the speed of people who quickly understood that she was both warmer than they expected and more exacting than they had hoped, and that both of these things were going to make them better at their jobs whether they liked it or not. She was fair. She was clear. She remembered everyone's names and a specific detail about each of them that made them feel seen, because she did see them. Seeing people was just what she did. Her friend Zara, who had been at the club that night and had witnessed the bar moment with the Korean stranger, brought it up precisely once. You kissed a random man at the bar and just walked away, Zara said, over lunch, with the expression of someone who had been processing this for 2 weeks and had thoughts. I gave him a cheek kiss and a kind word, Natasha said. He looked like he needed it. You could tell that from across the dance floor. He had his shoulders up around his ears, and he was drinking like someone who needed to forget something specific, Natasha said. It wasn't difficult to read. Most people would have left him alone. Most people don't pay attention, Natasha said simply. Zara looked at her with the fond, slightly exasperated expression she had been deploying in Natasha's direction for 6 years. You are so strange, she said affectionately. Thank you, said Natasha. The news arrived on a Tuesday. Zara called at 7 in the evening, and Natasha could hear something in her voice. A particular elevation, half excitement and half something more careful, before she had said anything of substance. So, Zara said. So, Natasha said. You know my cousin's friend June? Works in Apgujeong. Vaguely. She says. And I need you to prepare yourself. Zara. There is a very powerful, very wealthy, and I want to stress this word, very connected man in Seoul who has been looking for a black woman aged around 30, who kissed him at a club approximately 2 weeks ago. Natasha was quiet for 3 seconds. Connected how? She said. Another careful pause. Connected in the way that means his people have been making inquiries at Club Elysian, and apparently, he has been going there himself on Friday nights, which according to June is extremely out of character because this man does not. Zara. Connected how? He runs things, Natasha. His name is Kang Jaiwan, and he is not someone whose name you say loudly in certain rooms. Natasha sat down on her sofa. She was still in her work clothes, a perfectly tailored navy blazer and trousers she had bought last month. And she sat very precisely on the edge of the sofa cushion, the way she sat when she was processing information that required careful handling. The man from the bar, she said. Apparently. He's a mafia boss. Technically, the preferred term is Zara. Yes, essentially, yes. Natasha pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. She thought about the man at the bar, the expensive clothes, the particular quality of his stillness, the way the bar staff had moved around him slightly differently than they moved around other customers, which she had noted and filed away and not particularly examined at the time. She thought about the warmth she had felt radiating from him under the stress. Something genuinely human under all of it. She thought about the fact that he had been looking for her for 2 weeks. He's not going to find me, she said. Natasha. I work in a bank, Zara. I'm a branch manager, not a public figure. He doesn't know my name. He can't find me. Zara's pause was the particular pause of someone who is aware they are about to say something their friend does not want to hear. June says he has people, quite a lot of people, who are quite good at finding things. He's not going to find me, Natasha said again, with slightly less certainty. She was wrong. He found her on a Thursday, not through surveillance or informants or any of the considerable apparatus that Do-hyun had deployed across the preceding weeks with frustrating results. He found her through the universe's apparent commitment to narrative irony, which delivered Kang Jaiwan to the Mapogu branch of First Korean International Bank on a Thursday morning for the entirely mundane purpose of withdrawing a sum of cash that required in-branch processing, because his usual private banking contact was on leave and his assistant had selected this branch based solely on proximity. The teller who processed his withdrawal was named Yeonsu, and Yeonsu was 23 and nervous in the specific way of someone who has just realized that the man on the other side of the counter is not an ordinary customer and is handling this realization poorly. She made 3 errors in the first 4 minutes of the transaction, errors that were understandable given the circumstances but that compounded into something that Jaiwan, who was not in the business of tolerating poor service even on his most generous days, found genuinely difficult to continue with. I'd like to speak to the manager, he said, with the flat, quiet politeness of a man who has moved past irritation into something colder. Yeonsu picked up the phone with hands that were not entirely steady. She spoke briefly. She set it down. The manager will be right out, sir, she said. He waited. He looked at the branch, clean, well-organized, the kind of branch that reflected careful management. He looked at the artwork on the wall, which was tasteful. He looked at the monstera plant visible through the glass wall of the corner office, which was thriving. The corner office door opened, and Natasha Adeyemi, branch manager, 30 years old, in a perfectly tailored charcoal blazer and a silk blouse the color of champagne, with gold earrings catching the fluorescent light, walked across the banking floor toward him with the composed, professional grace of a woman entirely in her element. She had not yet looked at his face. She was looking at her tablet, reading the brief Yeonsu had sent, preparing herself with the thoroughness she brought to every customer interaction. She looked up. They looked at each other. For 4 seconds, which is, in the context of a professional banking environment, An extremely long time to look at someone, neither of them spoke. Jaiwin felt something rearrange itself in his chest. He had been imagining finding her for 3 weeks, imagining the moment with the abstract, slightly desperate energy of someone pursuing something they cannot entirely explain, and the reality of it, standing here under fluorescent lights in a bank in Mapogu, was simultaneously more ordinary and more overwhelming than any version he had constructed. She was exactly as he remembered and more. Without the amber lighting of the club, without the emerald dress, in the clear light of a Thursday morning in a workplace, she was more present, more real, more entirely herself. She stood there in her banking blazer and her champagne blouse and her gold earrings, and she looked at him with those eyes that he had been thinking about for 3 weeks, and he understood, with the clarity of someone receiving information that has been in transit for a while, that he was in significant trouble. Natasha, for her part, was performing the most demanding professional composure of her career. She recognized him immediately, not from a photograph but from the precise memory her body had of that night, the particular weight and presence of him, the face she had studied for 30 seconds at a bar while ordering water. And she recognized from Zara's description who he was, which information was producing, underneath her very controlled exterior, a reaction she was managing with everything she had. "Mr. Kong," she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. Branch manager voice, warm, professional, in control. "I'm Natasha Adeyemi, branch manager. I understand there's been an issue with your transaction. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. Please, come to my office and we'll sort this out immediately." She held the door open. She did not acknowledge, by any flicker of any muscle in her face, that they had ever been in the same room before. He walked past her into the office. He smelled of something expensive and understated. She closed the door. He turned around and looked at her. "You kissed me," he said, not accusing, not demanding, just direct. The statement of a man who had been waiting to say something and was now saying it. Natasha sat down behind her desk. She folded her hands on the surface. She looked at him across the desk with the precise composure of a woman who is conducting this on her terms or not at all. "You mentioned a transaction issue," she said. "Let me pull up your account." "Natasha." He said her name. He had read it on the nameplate on the desk, and something about the way he said it, like he was examining the weight of it, made her fingers pause fractionally on the keyboard. "You kissed me at Club Elysian 3 weeks ago. You told me everything would be okay. And then you walked away. Mr. Kong, I'm going to need you to. I have been looking for you," he said. "For 3 weeks." A pause. Natasha looked at him across the desk. She looked at this man. This extremely, frustratingly handsome, apparently very dangerous, clearly completely sincere man, and she made a decision. "I know," she said. "I heard." Something moved in his expression. "Then you know who I am. I know what people say about you. And, she said with the measured precision of someone choosing every word, "I think you should let me fix your transaction, and then I think you should leave, and I think that should be the end of it." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat down in the chair across from her desk. Not aggressively, not demandingly, but with the deliberate, patient quality of a man who has decided he is not in a hurry. "All right," he said. She blinked. "All right. Fix the transaction," he said. "I'll wait." She fixed the transaction. Took 9 minutes. He sat across from her desk for all 9 minutes with the composed, attentive expression of a man who was learning a room. He looked at the monstera plant. He looked at the framed prints. He looked at the coffee maker. He looked at her when she was looking at the screen with an intensity that she felt on the side of her face where she was not looking. She printed the confirmation. She slid it across the desk. "Your transaction is complete, Mr. Kong. Thank you for your patience." He took the paper. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He looked at her one more time. "The next time I come in," he said, "I'd like to speak to you again." "I'm the branch manager," she said. "I handle escalations." "Then I'll escalate," he said simply. He left. Natasha sat in her office for 3 minutes after he left, very still, looking at the space he had occupied. Then she picked up her phone and called Zara. "He found me," she said. Zara's response was immediate and did not contain words. He came back 4 times in the following 2 weeks. Each visit was technically legitimate, He was a customer, he had transactions, the bank's customer service obligations were clear, and Natasha was a professional. But each visit was also, transparently, an extended attempt to have a conversation that she was not yet willing to have. The first return visit, he arrived with a question about international transfers that his private banking team could have answered in 45 seconds. He spent 20 minutes in her office asking it. The second visit, he arrived with a complaint about the branch's ATM, which was functioning perfectly, as Natasha could see from her monitoring system, and when she pointed this out, he looked briefly caught and then rallied with the composure of a man regrouping. "It seemed slow," he said. "It is operating within normal parameters," she said. "I have high standards," he said. She almost smiled. She did not let him see it. The third visit was the one that became legendary in the branch, passed between staff in whispers of increasing delight. Kang Jaiwan arrived at 11 in the morning with a gift. Not flowers. He had apparently considered and rejected flowers as too obvious, but a coffee. A very specific coffee, in a cup from the cafe 3 streets over that Natasha had mentioned, once in passing during the second visit when he had asked if she ever left the office for lunch. The coffee was her order, which he had somehow learned, and which she chose not to examine too carefully, and it was the correct temperature, which meant he had timed his walk from the cafe with precision. He set it on her desk. She looked at it. She looked at him. "You cannot bring coffee to a bank manager," she said. "I just did," he said. "As a customer relations." "It's coffee, Natasha." She looked at the coffee. It smelled extraordinary. She had been in back-to-back meetings since 8 and had not had a chance to make her own. She looked at him. He was watching her with the patient, earnest, almost painfully sincere expression that she was discovering was his actual face under all the composed authority. The face of a man who wanted something and was trying very hard to want it correctly. She picked up the coffee. She took a sip. She did not say thank you, but she did not put it down. The fourth visit, the one that her staff talked about for months afterward, the one that caused Yansu to physically grab her colleague's arm and point, involved Jaiwan arriving at the branch, taking a numbered ticket from the queue system like an ordinary customer, and sitting in the waiting area. He sat in the plastic chair. He took the ticket. He waited. He waited 45 minutes because the branch was busy and the queue was long and there was no reason to expedite him to the front, and Natasha, watching from her office window, watched Kang Jaiwan, who had people to make queues disappear, who had never waited for anything in his professional life, sit in a plastic chair with a numbered ticket and wait. She watched him take out his phone and then put it away. She watched him look at the ticket. She watched him look at the counter with the patient expression of a man who had decided that this specifically was worth it. She got up. She opened her office door. She walked across the banking floor. She stopped in front of him. He looked up. "Come to my office," she said. He stood. He was taller than she remembered. "I was going to wait," he said. "I had a ticket." "You sat in a plastic chair for 45 minutes, she said. "With a ticket. Like a person." "I am a person," he said. "Most people in your position don't." "Most people in my position," he said quietly, "didn't get kissed by a stranger at a bar who told them it was going to be okay in the worst week of the last year. I'm not interested in what most people in my position do." She looked at him. He looked back. Around them, the banking floor continued its business with the professional dedication of people who were absolutely listening to every word. "Coffee," she said finally. "Not here. Somewhere that is not my workplace." The smile that arrived on his face was... She noted this with the precise attention she gave to things she intended to remember, the most genuine thing she had seen on him. It rearranged his whole face. It made him look younger and less guarded and entirely, unexpectedly human. "Yes," he said. "Coffee." Behind the counter, Yansu was gripping her colleague's arm with both hands. Coffee became dinner, became walks along the Han River, became the kind of long, wandering conversations that happen between people who have discovered, to their mutual surprise, that the other person is considerably more interesting than they initially had frameworks for. Jaiwan was not what she had expected. This was the thing Natasha kept returning to in the first weeks. Not that he was better or worse, but that he was genuinely, specifically different from the idea of him she had assembled from Reputation and Zara's alarm briefing. He was direct, in the manner of someone who had learned that indirectness was inefficient and had no patience for it. He was thoughtful in ways that occasionally caught her off guard. He remembered things she mentioned once in passing and referenced them weeks later, which told her that he was actually listening rather than waiting for his turn to speak. He had a dry, understated sense of humor that arrived unexpectedly and was funnier for it. He was also, and this she examined from several angles, clearly and uncomplicated smitten, in the way that powerful men are occasionally smitten when they encounter someone who is genuinely not intimidated by them. Natasha was not intimidated. She had managed difficult clients, navigated complex financial regulations, and built a career on the strength of her own judgment. She was not going to be destabilized by a handsome man with a complicated professional life, however persistent. She was, however, charmed, incrementally, reluctantly, thoroughly. The first time he came to dinner at her apartment, which she had agreed to on the condition that it was her apartment, her terms, her kitchen, her control of the environment, he arrived with wine chosen with obvious thought and a book she had mentioned wanting, which he had apparently sourced within 24 hours because he was a man with resources and had decided to use them in her direction. He sat at her kitchen counter while she cooked and talked with the relaxed, unperforming quality of someone who was comfortable in the space, and she found herself noticing how rare that was, how rarely people were simply comfortable, simply themselves, without the performance that proximity to someone new usually requires. "You're not what I expected," she said at some point in the evening over the food. "What did you expect?" he asked. She considered. "More managing. More performance." "I do enough of that professionally," he said. "I don't have the energy for it personally. Most people don't separate those. Most people exhaust themselves," he said. "I noticed you don't perform either." She looked at him across the table. "I've never seen the point," she said. "Neither have I," he said. "Not with you. Not from the first night." He met Zara at month 2, which went approximately as expected. Zara arrived for Sunday brunch, Natasha's kitchen, her best Belgian waffles, and found Jaiwan already there, making coffee with the comfortable familiarity of a man who knew where everything was kept, which told Zara several things about the current state of affairs before anyone had said a word. She sat down. She looked at him. He looked back with the composed equanimity of a man who understood he was being assessed and had no objection. "So," Zara said, "you're the one who sat in the plastic chair." Something flickered in his expression. "She told you about that." "She told me everything," Zara said. "I am her person. I understand." "And I want you to understand," Zara said, with the particular warmth and firmness of a best friend who means every word, "that she is extraordinary, and that I am paying attention." "So am I," he said. "That's the whole point." Zara looked at him for a long moment. She looked at Natasha, who was watching this exchange with the expression of someone who has brought two important things into proximity and is waiting to see if they combust. She looked back at Jaiwan. "Fine," she said. "Pass me the syrup." He told her at month 3 the full truth of what he did. Not the abbreviated, euphemistic version, the real one. He told her in her living room on a Sunday evening, with the direct, careful seriousness of a man who had decided that this was a conversation that did not get to be comfortable. He told her what the organization was. He told her the nature of his involvement. He told her, without softening it, the history and the scope of it. She listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. Not a question, a genuine inquiry about his intention. "Because you read people," he said. "You would have found the shape of it eventually, and I didn't want you to find it from somewhere else. And if I say I can't, then I understand," he said. "And I don't make it difficult for you." She looked at him. This complicated, careful, persistent man who had sat in a plastic chair for 45 minutes and brought her the correct coffee at the correct temperature and told her the truth when he didn't have to. "I'm not saying that," she said. "I'm saying I needed to know. And now I know." He exhaled, slowly, in the way of someone releasing something they have been holding carefully. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. The proposal happened at month 8, which Natasha's mother said was too fast and Zara said was about time and Natasha said was exactly when it was supposed to happen, which was the correct answer. It was not elaborate in the performative sense. No public restaurants, no orchestrated flash mobs, no audience. He had understood, from paying attention, that Natasha's relationship with spectacle was specific. She liked beautiful things, carefully chosen, in context she controlled. She did not want to be surprised in public. He proposed in her apartment on a Tuesday evening, which was the most Natasha day of the week because Tuesday evenings were when she cooked properly and listened to music and existed fully as herself rather than as the professional version. He had made dinner. He had been learning quietly with the serious application he brought to things that mattered. And it was good, which she told him honestly because she was not going to pretend mediocre food was excellent when she had standards. After dinner, he set a small box on the table. No speech, no kneeling. He knew her well enough to know that kneeling would make her uncomfortable in a way that would overshadow the moment. Just the box and his eyes and, "I would like to marry you, if you want that." She opened the box. The ring was a 3-carat oval diamond on a platinum band with small emeralds on either side. Emerald because he had remembered the dress. Of course he had remembered the dress. She looked at it for a long moment at this ring that was exactly her. Exactly the right combination of significant and specific, and then she looked at him. "You remembered the green," she said. "I remember everything about that night," he said. "I have been remembering it for 8 months." She picked up the ring. She put it on herself, which made him laugh. A real laugh, the full one that she had learned was the best sound he made. "I want that," she said. "Yes." The wedding was, by the consensus of everyone who attended and the significant portion of Seoul's social world that heard about it afterward, the most beautiful and most expensive and most distinctly Natasha event anyone had witnessed. In recent memory, she planned it with the organizational precision of a woman who had managed a banking branch and understood that excellence was the product of structure, not accident. She had a vision, clear, specific, non-negotiable. And she executed it with a team of vendors who quickly understood that their client had opinions and the vocabulary to articulate them. The venue was a private estate outside Seoul that Jaewon had procured through means that remained vague but were clearly effective. A property of such genuine, architectural beauty that Natasha had walked through it on the viewing and said nothing for 5 minutes, which Jaewon had learned to read as the highest form of approval she had. The ceremony was in the estate gardens, on a June evening when the light came from the west in the particular golden way of early summer and made everything look like something that had been deliberately lit. There were flowers, an abundance of them, white and champagne and soft green, chosen by Natasha with the same seriousness she brought to everything she chose. There were candles, as evening fell, hundreds of them, warm and intimate. Natasha's dress was custom. Of course it was custom. She had spent 4 months working with a designer, a Korean-American woman based in New York who understood exactly what Natasha wanted because Natasha was very good at communicating what she wanted. On a gown that was, in the designer's own words, the most satisfying commission of my career. It was ivory silk, fitted through the bodice, with a train that behaved magnificently and a back that was interesting in a way that required precise engineering to achieve. It had hand-embroidered detail at the hem and the sleeves that had taken 8 weeks. Her hair was natural and full and slightly upswept, with a few pieces falling loose, and she wore diamonds, at her ears, at her throat, at her wrists, because it was her wedding and she was not going to underdress for her own wedding. She looked extraordinary in the way that people look extraordinary when everything about a moment is entirely right, when the clothes and the setting and the emotion are all fully aligned with who a person actually is. Zara, walking ahead of her as maid of honor in champagne silk, cried before they were halfway down the aisle. Her mother, in the front row, cried silently in the way of women who are proud beyond the available language for pride. Jaewon stood at the end of the aisle in a dark navy suit that had clearly been made for this specific occasion, and looked at her walking toward him with the expression of a man who does not have adequate words for what he is feeling and has decided not to try. She reached him. She looked at him. "You're crying," she said quietly, because he was slightly at the edges. "I'm not," he said. "You are." "It's the light," he said. "There is no wind," she said. "The light is very bright." "Jaewon." "Natasha." She smiled at him, the real one, the full one. And she took his hand and they faced forward. The officiant spoke. They said the things that need to be said, and meant them in the particular way that people mean things when they have arrived at a moment through something genuine rather than something easy. He placed the ring on her finger, the emerald and diamond ring that she had put on herself on a Tuesday evening in her apartment and worn every day since. And she placed the ring on his finger, a simple platinum band she had chosen because he preferred simple things and she had been paying attention. They were pronounced married. He kissed her with the careful reverence of a man who understood the weight of the moment. She kissed him back with the warmth of a woman who had walked into a nightclub to celebrate a promotion and had not expected to find anything but an excellent night and had found, instead, a person. The guests applauded. Zara cheered with a volume that belied her champagne silk composure. Jaiwan's people, the lieutenants and associates who had witnessed 3 weeks of club visits and queue tickets and coffee deliveries and had said nothing, stood and clapped with the specific enthusiasm of people who had been rooting for this outcome for a considerable time. The reception was outdoors, as the evening fully arrived, with the candles and the flowers and a table setting that Natasha had designed down to the placement of each centerpiece. The food was exceptional. The music moved seamlessly from ceremony to celebration. There was a moment late in the evening when she and Jaiwan were briefly alone at the edge of the garden while the party continued behind them, and she leaned against his shoulder and looked at the lit windows of the estate and the stars becoming visible above and felt quiet. The particular quiet of a life that has arrived somewhere it was always supposed to arrive. That night at the bar, he said. What made you? You looked like you needed it, she said. The same answer she had given Zara. Except this time she added, and something told me you were worth the 30 seconds. 30 seconds, he said. That's all it was. That's all it took, she said. I told you I read people. He pressed his lips to the top of her head, which was becoming his preferred method of expressing things that he did not have words for. You were right, he said. Everything is okay. She laughed, the full one, the one that carried, and the sound went out into the garden and the warm June night and was, if you were paying attention, extraordinary. She had always been paying attention. That was the whole point.
Hi guys, in this story we learned that power means nothing without humanity. Kindly subscribe and like.